If you asked Ferrari today about its relationship with Haas, the answer would sound remarkably straightforward. The partnership remains strong. The engine agreement is secure. Both teams continue working closely, and there is no indication that anything significant has changed. On the surface, it appears to be one of the most stable customer relationships anywhere in Formula One. But Formula One isn't always defined by what teams announce. Sometimes the biggest changes happen quietly, long before they become obvious to the outside world. While Ferrari and Haas continue speaking with complete confidence about their future together, a different story may be unfolding behind the scenes. Not one built on conflict or dramatic headlines, but on something much more subtle. Little by little, Haas appears to be building capabilities that it once depended on Ferrari to provide. Each individual change seems small, viewed on its own, almost insignificant. Yet when those changes begin to accumulate, they can gradually reshape the balance between two organizations. That raises an intriguing question. Is Haas simply becoming a stronger customer team while remaining fully committed to Ferrari? Or is it carefully laying the foundations for a future where it has far more freedom than ever before? That's exactly what we're exploring today on F1 Strategy Hub. To understand why this story matters, it's important to look at how the Ferrari-Haas relationship was originally built. From the moment Haas entered Formula One, the team's strategy was unlike almost any other on the grid. Instead of trying to develop every major component internally, it focused on maximizing what the regulations allowed it to purchase from an established manufacturer. Ferrari became the cornerstone of that approach. Haas sourced its power unit, gearbox, and several other performance-critical components directly from Ferrari. The arrangement allowed the American team to avoid the enormous costs of designing every system from scratch while concentrating its own resources on the areas the rules required it to develop independently. But the partnership extended well beyond the parts fitted to the car. For years, Haas engineers benefited from Ferrari's technical infrastructure, including access to advanced simulation resources and aerodynamic testing facilities. A dedicated engineering presence in Italy also meant that collaboration between the two organizations was unusually close compared to many other customer relationships in Formula One. That model made perfect business sense. Haas could operate with a leaner organization, while Ferrari gained a committed customer and a long-term technical partner. Both sides benefited from an arrangement that appeared efficient, practical, and financially sustainable. Over time, however, such close cooperation naturally created a relationship in which one side possessed far greater technical independence than the other. Ferrari wasn't simply supplying components, it provided much of the environment in which Haas developed its Formula One program. For nearly a decade, that formula remained remarkably consistent. It became one of the defining characteristics of Haas's identity as a team. The question now isn't whether that model worked. It clearly did. The real question is whether Haas is beginning to build a different model for its future, one where cooperation with Ferrari remains important, but dependence gradually becomes a choice rather than a necessity. At first glance, it's easy to assume Ferrari's biggest reward from the partnership was financial. Selling power units, transmissions, and technical components created a reliable source of income, and customer teams have always played an important role in Formula One's business model. But the real value of the relationship extended well beyond the invoices. When two organizations work this closely together, information naturally flows alongside technology. Engineers communicate regularly, development schedules overlap, and technical discussions become part of everyday operations. That doesn't imply anything improper. It is simply the reality of maintaining a close engineering partnership. Because Haas relied heavily on Ferrari's facilities for key areas of development, Ferrari enjoyed a uniquely detailed understanding of how its customer team operated. It could observe development priorities, Understand which technical directions Haas chose to pursue and see how those ideas evolved throughout a season. For Ferrari, that level of visibility carried strategic value. Although Haas was a customer, it was also a competitor every race weekend. Every point scored influences championship standings, prize money, and the competitive order of the grid. Knowing how another team approaches technical challenges can provide useful context when making your own decisions. Just as importantly, Haas had very few practical alternatives. Much of its technical operation was closely connected to Ferrari's infrastructure, making the partnership exceptionally stable. The longer that system remained in place, the stronger those ties became. That is why the current developments attract so much attention. If Haas gradually builds more of its own technical resources, Ferrari doesn't necessarily lose a customer. What it may lose is the unique position that came from being at the center of almost every stage of Haas's development process. The turning point in this story isn't marked by a dramatic announcement or a sudden split between longtime partners. Instead, it begins with the arrival of a new collaborator whose role is fundamentally different from Ferrari's. That collaborator is Toyota. Rather than replacing Ferrari's existing responsibilities, Toyota has entered the picture by helping Haas expand its own technical capabilities. It's an important distinction because the partnership isn't about removing one relationship. It's about adding another. At first glance, that may not seem especially significant. Formula One teams frequently work with multiple technical partners, each contributing in different areas. But the long-term impact depends on what those partnerships actually create. Every new engineering resource, manufacturing process, or development tool that Toyota helps establish gives Haas another capability it previously lacked. None of those additions require Ferrari to step away. The two relationships can continue side by side without any immediate conflict. That is precisely why the shift can be difficult to recognize. Publicly, Ferrari remains Haas's engine supplier and an essential technical partner. Those facts haven't changed. Yet behind the scenes, Haas is slowly expanding the number of areas where it can rely on its own growing infrastructure instead of depending entirely on Ferrari's. It's a gradual process rather than a dramatic transformation. One capability is added here, another there, until the overall structure begins to look very different from where it started. Whether that ultimately changes the balance of the Ferrari-Haas partnership remains an open question. But Toyota's involvement has unquestionably introduced something Haas never truly had before, an additional path for growth that doesn't rely exclusively on Maranello. Perhaps the clearest sign of this gradual transformation can be found away from the racetrack, inside the engineering tools that shape every Formula One car long before it turns a wheel. One of the most significant developments is Haas's investment in its own driver-in-the-loop simulator. For years, the team relied heavily on Ferrari's simulation resources, giving its engineers access to world-class technology without the enormous expense of building a complete system themselves. That arrangement worked well. It allowed Haas to remain competitive while operating with a relatively lean structure. Now, however, the picture is beginning to evolve. With Toyota supporting the development of new technical infrastructure, Haas is establishing simulation capabilities within its own organization. Instead of depending entirely on facilities owned and operated elsewhere, the team is creating an environment where engineers can test ideas, analyze performance, and refine setups using resources under Haas's direct control. It's important not to overstate what this means. Ferrari's simulator remains an important part of the relationship, and there has been no indication that Haas intends to abandon the technical cooperation that has existed for years. The existing partnership continues to provide value to both organizations. By the time the current Ferrari engine agreement reaches its final years, the Haas-Ferrari relationship could look very different from the one that began nearly a decade earlier. The partnership may still exist, Ferrari may still be supplying power units, and Haas may still value the experience and resources that come from working with one of Formula One's most historic teams. But the difference could be the balance of choice. When Haas first entered Formula One, the team built its entire operation around efficiency and access. Ferrari provided the technology, infrastructure, and support that allowed Haas to compete without creating every piece of the puzzle itself. Now, step by step, Haas appears to be adding more pieces of that puzzle internally. The significance is not that one team is replacing another. The significance is that dependence is gradually being reduced. A stronger simulator, more internal expertise, additional manufacturing options, a broader technical foundation. These developments may seem small individually, but together they create something every Formula One team values: freedom. And that leads to the bigger question. Is Haas simply building a stronger partnership network for the future? Or is it quietly preparing itself for a time when it can make decisions from a position of complete independence? Only time will reveal the answer. But one thing is clear. In Formula One, the biggest changes are often the ones that happen slowly, away from the spotlight. By the time everyone notices the shift, the transformation may already be complete.